I think you should celebrate the things you're doing well. And I think, again, you have incredible educational opportunities in Northwestern Ontario. And you have to pay attention to building organizational values. Because, again, in our system that is so complex and so layered, assuming that people have the same values is probably optimistic. And as far as, if I had to say one strategy that I think the healthcare system needs to embrace, it's to liberate excellence. I think the capacity for excellence is deeply, deeply and widely distributed in the healthcare system. Healthcare people tend to be high achievers, motivated, smart. But we get in their way, and our systems get in their way. We think we're minimizing risk with all of this regulation and rules, but actually we're just getting in the way of progress. And if I thought that the regulation and the rules actually did minimize risk, and we didn't have to read about Baker Norton, and we didn't have to read the tally that the system takes every day in terms of avoidable error and harm, I would say fine. But it actually isn't doing any good. So one thing I would urge you to try to do is to get rid of the clutter in the system and let people figure out the best approach to solutions. I think the health human resource issues will be solved at a very local level, at a very grassroots program level, where people get together and decide how they're going to organize their work. And maybe in one facility, a doctor will do this, a nurse will do this, a therapist will do this, a pharmacist will do this, and maybe in another facility, they will divide up the work entirely differently. And as long as we have performance standards and as long as we measure them, I think we'll be in very good shape. But I think we need to find a way to get out of the way of people who can organize themselves to do better. So try to experiment, and I think you will reap the rewards. And finally, couple of concluding remarks on why this is important. I don't have stories for you that are as compelling as the three earlier ones you've said today. And those ground level, the pictures, the accounts, the tales of what goes right and what goes wrong, they are compelling and they speak to the heart, and they should, and they're absolutely inspirational stories. And all I'm suggesting is that you cannot address the issues embedded in those stories if you're only working at a micro level. Every one of us has to take an interest in the bigger picture at the policy level. And I know it's not something that's built into what we do in healthcare. We're very specific, we're very focused, we're very in the here and now, and of course that's a wonderful thing to have that focus for the people that we care for and so forth, or that you care for. But the more we understand about health, the more we realize that it is intimately intertwined with general public policy. It matters what the tax rates are and who pays them. It matters that Canada, like other countries, has made tax changes in the past decade that primarily benefit the rich. It matters if health disparities are growing because socioeconomic disparities are widening. It matters if well-off people access even free care more than less well-off people for whom the care is equally free, because there are some barriers to doing that. It matters whether the environment is organized to allow people to be healthier. And that is a community and a civic issue. It has nothing to do with healthcare. And if you really want a transformation, I think the first thing we have to do is have a mental image of what that looks like. And what we thought it looked like 20 years ago even, or 30 years ago, that is a healthcare transformation, turns out to be both a healthcare and a health production transformation. And it has to be part of everybody's agenda. It's not the LHIN board's business exclusively. It's not the senior executive team's business exclusively. It's not the ministry's. Transformation has to be a daily preoccupation for everybody who works in the healthcare system, from the home care aide to the neurosurgeon. And I know this is a difficult thing to wrap your heads around, but no company, Toyota would not allow its workforce to be oblivious to what Toyota was trying to do culturally. And everyone who works on that Toyota assembly line understands his or her job very well, but also understand what the Toyota is supposed to look like. And the reason why they make better cars than the Americans do is because that culture seeps into the bones at the ground level, and I don't think it has to the same extent in the American car manufacturers, although it's getting better. And this is just a depiction of what, again, you already know. This is our probably best guess now of what creates good health, and the size of the circles is my crude attempt at a statistical depiction here. But it's all those things, and they're probably fairly equal. I mean, nobody who's looked at this carefully thinks that healthcare explains more than 20% of health status, especially in a rich country. So we need all these things, including some values things like cooperation, some basic human things like family. Community is an elusive but critical concept here, and so on. But that's what we spend our money on. We load it on healthcare and education because that's where Canada has invested so much of its psychic energy and its social capital. And I'm not suggesting that this is a bad thing. I'm suggesting that if we're going to continue to have this kind of relatively heavy investment in healthcare, we should at least maximize what it achieves for us. We should at least try to make that curve I showed you earlier slope upwards instead of flattening out at a distressingly low level. And it should also lead to some conversations about whether over time we can't shrink that circle a little bit in proportional terms and maybe invest in some of those things that would have a bit of a greater payoff. You're very fortunate in Ontario that you have people who have been looking around the world about what makes great healthcare systems, and they're trying to draw the lessons. Ross Baker and colleagues from other countries are producing a series on high performance health systems, and these are some of the lessons that they have learned. They transform themselves by getting primary care right, or primary health care right. They do invest a lot more than we have in information systems and technologies, but it's not the systems and the technologies that do it. It's the human interaction with the information and the ability to deploy it to make care better and systems more efficient. Quality improvement tools and techniques you're already doing, but they do it as a daily part of their business, and it's no longer a project-oriented thing, it's a way of life. They do empower workplaces and workforces. They allow people to use their brains and their judgment and their experience and their skill innovatively, and accountably to be sure, but innovatively. They align the incentives and the objectives, but above all, it stems from a fundamental insight. And that fundamental insight of transformation has to be that the status quo simply is not acceptable. I don't know if the public in Canada is there yet, and I frankly don't know if the healthcare system is there yet. But after doubling spending in a decade and still being faced with some of the challenges we are, I think that's the fundamental question that needs to be put on the table. And if you, and I hope you are, fundamentally dissatisfied with where we are, not because you don't recognize the wonderful excellence that takes place in thousands of places every day in the healthcare system, but because as a system, we are still not getting the job done in relative terms, and there are places around the world that do better, then I think it's a lot easier to make a commitment to change because you own the problems and the solutions. And the final thought I want to leave you with is that, again, this will sound like strange territory, but improving health is actually more about citizenship and policy than it is about healthcare. Yes, healthcare should be excellent, and I cannot commend you enough for your efforts as a LHIN, as a diverse region that has lots of the same characteristics of a combination of northern, southern Saskatchewan, diverse population, low population density, enormous challenges, large Aboriginal population with special cultural attributes and needs and so forth. All of these things I understand, I think, pretty well. And anyone who delivers better quality health care every day on a ground level is an admirable contributor to society. And better health care at the end of the day, however, can probably be improved by better processes, quality improvement, tools, measurement, and so on. In other words, I think we know how to do it. I think the toolbox is there. Spread is tough, but we do know how to do it. But we don't know how to produce better health, actually. We've kind of stalled out. We've stalled out at reducing health disparities. We haven't found a way to crack that code of how do you make the bottom 20% in terms of health status as healthy as the next lowest 20% or the next highest 20%. How do you shrink those disparities in the population? This is a very daunting challenge, and it's a very big challenge in regions like yours that have very diverse populations. So this is civic work. This is the work of discussing in your communities what health is supposed to look like. How should the community organize itself to produce it? What is the relationship between health care and other forms of investment in order to get there? How do you create opportunities for people to make healthier choices, even though when you read the sobering results of the ACE study of Dr. Folletti, you realize that maybe we are a little bit too sanguine about the prospects for people making choices without addressing the root causes of their problems.